Hi friends, my name's Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vigo. So I quickly wanted to talk about something that I saw today. It was Ellen Page, who was an actor, and she gave this speech on the Late Show with Stephen Colbert. I don't watch Stephen Colbert because he's become really like a Democratic Party tool. You know, it's like the Democratic Party can do no wrong, and the GOP, everything is wrong with them, and it's almost as if when Trump got into office, or when the GOP gets into office, that everything goes wrong, and nothing is really wrong when the Democratic Party is in office, when one of their candidates becomes president of the United States. That's not the case. The duopoly they're just like two wings of the same bird, a warmongering neoliberal, neoconservative sort of blob, really, a contraption, you know, like a machine that is basically hell-bent on imperialism and war. We'll never see, most Democrats, you'll never see a war that they don't like, and they usually will even shame Trump if he looks like he's pulling out of a war, which that's what he looks like, but he's not actually. But you know, anytime he suggests that he might be pulling out of a war, most Democrats will sort of shame him. So this just indicates to you that, you know, indicates to us how it's just a duopoly, it's just a war machine. Corporate war machine is both parties, and it doesn't matter really in many ways who's in office. One can be more crass than the other, like the GOP can be more crass than the Democrats, and that's why they don't like Trump, because he's a terrible salesperson and he's unpredictable, and they like somebody who's more predictable, like Obama, and who is appealing to look at, and who is seen as sort of groovy and cool, and that makes for a better salesperson for these wars and for other things. But Obama was as horrific and expanded 2 wars to 7, and he also was called deporter-in-chief because he deported 2 million plus people. He did all sorts of other horrific things. He had a kill list on Tuesday. I mean, he was appalling. But people always say, you know, you'll hear people lamenting and saying, oh, I wish Obama was still in office. They have no idea, or do they not care? I don't know. They have no idea what this man was doing for those 8 years. I'm bringing this up because Ellen Page, she says how awful Trump is in relation to LGBT rights. And, you know, Mike Pence is really awful. I mean, Mike Pence is a Christian fascist, and if he gets in after Trump, it'll be, you know, you'll really start to see horrific things, because you know, Christian fascists are really scary, and they've been around for a while, and they've been moving closer and closer to the high office. So, you know, Ellen Page sort of carries on about Trump and how awful he is, how, you know, how it's or the racism, etc. But the other administration, when it's a Democratic Party, their policies are as racist as Trump's. They just don't come out and say really racist things to the public. But you look at the policies, the foreign policies and the domestic policies are just as racist as Trump. Maybe not in relation to, like, as if it's really something to applaud when LGBT people are allowed to be in the military. Seriously, is that the bar we're trying to reach for? You know, a bar where people go over and they're forced to do immoral things to these very poor people in Middle Eastern countries and elsewhere. I mean, is that something that, you know, of course it's a rights issue, not preventing LGBT people from being in the military, trans people in particular, but what a horrific thing to be involved in. So, but anyway, Ellen Page gave this impassioned speech on Stephen Colbert, and Stephen Colbert, obviously, he spends every night dumping on Trump, and there's plenty to dump out on, but I mean, that's low-hanging fruit. If he was any sort of real political commentator, which he's never been, but if he was, he would have been criticizing both parties equally, because they're appalling, both of them, the Democratic Party and the GOP, and doesn't matter how much he loved Obama. Obama was doing appalling things, but that's the problem with these jesters, these corporate jesters like Stephen Colbert and you know, Jon Stewart and that other guy, that English guy, and whatever, I can't remember his name right now. All these so-called all these comedians, they're just establishment tools, in particular for the Democratic Party, and you can say the same for most of the mainstream media, except for the Fox News. They're all just propping up the Democratic Party, and that's all really about war, because the Democratic Party knows that they get a lot of support, they get a lot of lobbying money from these weapons manufacturers, and so it benefits them individually in their careers. They become very wealthy if they are warmongers, and also if they are corporate lovers. I just want to mention that about Ellen Page. Most celebrities, 99% of celebrities, except for the likes of, say, Susan Sarandon and maybe John Cusack, I don't know, but Susan Sarandon, she's always vilified because she criticizes equally any party. She doesn't even single out a party, she just talks about it in a sort of as an empire, really. Most celebrities think that there's a good party and a bad party, and that is just so not the case. And they're so clueless, and so they're propping up Hillary Clinton and propping up the Democratic Party, and they think it's all going to be fine. If a Democrat gets in, they think it's all going to be fine. When Kamala Harris gets in, if she gets in, which I don't think she will, but she's the selected person by the selected candidate already by the DNC and the Democratic Party. If you follow elections, the sort of appalling elections in the United States, the DNC admitted in a court case where they were sued that they select who their nominee is going to be for the presidential race. They select them. They don't pay attention to what their voters do in the primary, and that's what happened to Bernie Sanders. He was overlooked by the DNC. They picked their own candidate, Hillary Clinton, who was a terrible choice, and Bernie Sanders stupidly didn't challenge them. But Bernie Sanders was robbed of that primary, and that's because the DNC have stated in that court case they have the right to pick whomever they wish. They can sit in the back rooms, literally, with cigars, that's what they say, and pick the candidate who is going to be the presidential nominee. Now, what does that say about the future of elections in the United States? What it says is that you can spend all your money and your time and resources, like as much as you want, for a candidate like Tulsi Gabbard, even though Tulsi Gabbard has a lot of problems, and I think she'll be sort of similar to Obama with kill lists and stuff like that, because she is not anti-interventionist. She's anti-interventionist, she says, but she is happy to use drones and stuff. And she also has a questionable position about Muslims. There's a lot of problems with her, and she also doesn't seem to, even though she's been a vet and she knows what it's like to be in Iraq, she never really seems to talk about the civilians that are the biggest casualties of these wars. She doesn't mention the civilians in any of these speeches. She talks about the soldiers and talks about people at home, which I find really bizarre, and is bizarre for a vet who's been to Iraq, I think, twice, so she knows what goes on there, and it's appalling. But anyway, but talking about, people putting all their energy into people like Tulsi Gabbard and who else is there? I don't know, but whoever you want as a candidate, Bernie Sanders, is that, they've already said to you, the DNC has already told you that they pick their own candidates, and they feel quite entitled to pick their own candidate. So they've already picked Kamala Harris. She was already schmoozing in the Hamptons about a year ago and getting plenty and plenty of money for, and backup and endorsement by the people who are the kingmakers, basically, who are deciding who is going to be the president of the United States. So she's already been endorsed by the Democratic National Congress, and the primary means nothing. You can almost take bets that this primary, where they're pretending that they're going to get people to vote and decide who's going to be the Democratic nominee, I can guarantee that it'll be Kamala Harris. It won't matter. It won't be Tulsi Gabbard. It won't be Bernie Sanders again. It won't be any of those people. It will be Kamala Harris, because they've already picked her. They've already decided who's going to be the choice. So one has to ask, what is the point in spending all this money and time on these people like Tulsi Gabbard, etc., when they've already admitted? You know, it's kind of an insanity in a way, isn't it? Don't you think? I mean, wouldn't it have been better if people had sort of gone, okay, well, you're finished, your party is finished, and say to Tulsi Gabbard, until you go independent, I can't support you because it's a waste of time. It's a waste of time and resources, because they're not going to pick you. And if you are a anti-imperialist, anti-war candidate, if you truly are, which Tulsi Gabbard, every indication is that she isn't. Really, that's what I think anyway. She's got many good things, but no, she's not. If you truly are an anti-war, anti-imperialist candidate, you are never going to be selected by the Democratic Party, never, as a nominee for POTUS. And if you, for some miracle, managed to get through and you became president, like William Bloom, the historian, said, if you started to wind back the wars and everything, he said, if I was president, I would, sort of wind back the wars, and I'd sort of do everything I could to reverse all of that. And he said on the 5th day I'd be assassinated. So that's what will happen. That's where it's at with the U.S. and their bodgy elections and their corporate warmongering empire. If you are ever an anti-war, anti-imperialist, you won't get into that President of the United States position. And if you do happen to, which is out of some freaky incident, they'll kill you in some way, or they'll frame you and impeach you or something, but they'll get rid of you. So that's how far gone it is. I'm sorry to sound so pessimistic, but really that's how far gone it is there. So anyway, we need to ask ourselves, I don't live in the United States, but the reason I comment so much on what happens from US empire and what happens in the United States and so forth is because we all are affected. The global community is affected by the outrageous stuff that goes on from the US. Like, look at Venezuela right now. They're literally, they're appointing, they're doing a coup right out in the open, appointing some other person who's not been elected, who's been groomed to be part of this coup. That's Guaido. And Maduro was elected in a transparent election, and here they are, literally trying to appoint somebody to lead the country. The U.S. is doing a coup in the open, trying to appoint somebody who they've been helping with funding the opposition to disrupt the country, putting crippling sanctions on Venezuela to make it an absolute hell to live in. I mean, Maduro has his own problems and probably could have handled a lot of things better, and they need to have something different than oil as an export. But the reason all of this is happening is because of the U.S. Most of what's happening in Venezuela is because of U.S. meddling, and you never know that if you are watching the corporate media. But I mean, what I'm saying here is that the reason I'm commenting on the U.S. empire so often is because they've meddled in my own country's politics. They got help. They admitted they got rid of Gough Whitlam in '75, and he was a Democratic Socialist Prime Minister and was against war, and he was for free healthcare and so forth. And they got rid of him because they didn't like the idea that he was against the Vietnam War and so forth. So they admitted, the CIA admitted getting rid of him. So they continually meddle in my own country. That we have Pine Gap. We're helping them with the drone program with the Pine Gap in the Northern Territory, near Alice Springs, but all sorts of things. They're meddling all the time in my country. We're just like a colony, really, of the United States. And there are so many countries. There's been 81 countries meddled with overthrown democratically elected governments or attempted to overthrow since 1946. This is the US empire has done this. They meddle all the time and in other people's democracies. So that's why I have such an interest. That's why I comment so much, because they've been leading us into more and more wars and could possibly lead us into a nuclear Armageddon situation with Russia and China. So that's why I do that. But anyway, that's why I comment on it, because they're appalling, and the US empire needs to fall. And that's why I mention things like the Empire Files, because it helps us get informed about what's happening. So check out that, the Empire Files with Abby Martin. Anyway, so I've lost my train of thought, but anyway, this is the, as you can see, you know, the elections in the United States are just, they talk about other people's elections, but they're just the most rigged elections there are. And so you're not really going to get anybody who is not a warmonger in that position. And you're not going to get anybody who isn't imperialist. So what does that mean for the rest of the world? It means that we're going to be constantly having to deal with attempts on our own democracies, attempts to overthrow our governments, attempts to invade our countries and take our resources, which is what they're doing in Venezuela. Venezuela has the most oil, I think, now in the world, more than Saudi Arabia, and that's why they want to take over. They want to privatize Venezuela. They want to take their oil, and they openly talk about taking their oil. I mean, this is the sort of insanity that the US empire is, this so arrogant that it talks about taking other people's resources, invading their countries and taking their resources. And that's when I say Trump is not a good salesperson, because he's saying it all out in the open. See, they don't like these things said out in the open like that. They like to do it in sort of secretive ways if they can, and use proxies to get to foment discord and all of this. They like to fund oppositions and all of that, and they don't usually talk about it openly. But Trump kind of he's like that species is saying, an elephant in a china shop. He's just a bull in a china shop. He's just stomping around and just saying whatever he feels like. That's why they like people like Obama, who seem like they're very civilized, and yet they're doing all these horrific things behind the scenes, causing more and more wars and invading countries, and like Syria, starting that sort of situation there, and Libya, destroying Libya with Hillary Clinton. So anyway, so, you know, the US, this is why we need a grassroots, nonviolent grassroots movement, or we need a yellow vest movement, because the US is too far gone now. It's an empire. It will always have imperialist warmongers at its head. You will never see the likes of anybody who is any remotely anti-war, is anti-war, anti-imperialist. You will never see them as a president of the United States. And if they are, they're going to be knocked off. So we have to have a yellow vest movement globally, because it's too far gone now. Anyway, I'm going to go. So the smoke's starting to get a bit much, as you can hear the helicopters in the background. And I just want to thank the Tasmanian Fire Service for being so great in keeping control of these fires. I really, really don't want to lose our home, and I've spent the last almost 2 weeks worrying about that night and day, that we were going to be homeless. And of course we're not out of danger yet, but you know, it's looking a little bit better. So anyway, that's why I've been a bit fragmented, and I've been talking about the Tasmanian fires mostly the last 3 or 4 videos, because that's been the most anxiety-provoking and dominating my mind space. Anyway, so thanks very much for watching. We need a grassroots movement, a non-violent grassroots movement, because it's too far gone now. And elections, and, you know, as that saying goes, if voting ever made any change, they'd make it illegal. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. My name's Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. Till next time, bye for now.